The past couple days or so, President Joe Biden's mental fitness and his cognitive decline while in office have been spoken about at length. The leaked Robert Hur audio is being discussed pretty heavily. The possibility of Joe Biden being in a wheelchair for his second term, if he were elected to a second term, is being discussed. Jake Tapper's new book is being discussed, his book called Original Sin. Cenk Uygur decided to weigh in on it with a post on X here saying, there is a 0% chance that mainstream media or establishment Democrats will learn anything from the Joe Biden debacle. This is the hand-wringing phase, but by the time the next primary comes, they will be telling you the exact same thing. Bow down to Democratic leadership. Same exact thing they did after the Iraq War. I can't believe we got it wrong. It was one-time mistake. We'll definitely get it right next time. And the next time the powerful told them to heal, they all healed. Our media always obeys the powerful as their central command. Okay, so let's talk about it. This is a typical line, I would say, from Cenk Uygur, where it's like, oh, the Democratic establishment, the media. But here's the thing. The problem is not so much the Democratic establishment in the media when it comes to the 2020 primary, because during the 2020 primary, it was voters who elected Joe Biden. It was voters in South Carolina who created that Joe momentum. You had the South Carolina primary and Jim Clyburn endorsing Joe Biden right before Super Tuesday. And that gave a lot of voters the impression that Joe Biden is the chosen one. He's the man to take on Trump. They're like, oh, shoot, he just dominated in South Carolina. I guess I got to go out and vote for him. And he won a bunch of states on Super Tuesday, particularly southern states like Alabama and Mississippi. Biden absolutely dominated Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders won California and a few other states, but Biden dominated because people saw him as a chosen electable one. It was the voters who did that, and ultimately the buck does stop with the voters. Now, the media obviously does play a role in some of that. They go out and they say, oh yeah, this candidate, they have so much momentum, and the voters can sometimes buy that or not buy that, and they might vote based on that. So yes, the media may have pulled the wool over some voters' eyes, but ultimately voters do have agency. They will vote for people, and that's it. The media does not vote for them. Money does not vote for them. So I just don't see where this idea that, oh, we have to blame the media and the Democratic establishment for everything. Obviously, it's frustrating to see them act like someone has it together when they don't necessarily have it together. But the issue was that Democratic voters saw Biden as the most electable one in 2020. They were like, oh, Trump is unhinged. We need someone calm, someone established, someone who we associate with our cool boy Obama, great guy who won 2 elections in a row. So that's Joe Biden, that's not Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is off in fringe la la land in their view, not in my view. In their view, though, they're like, yeah, no, we can't go off with this loose cannon candidate. We need the established one. We need the one who's got a history of being on presidential tickets and winning. And to them, that was Joe Biden. And Joe Biden has been on 2 presidential tickets before, or had been prior to that, as the vice presidential nominee. So then 2024, obviously, what they did, the media pretended like he was with it, like he was sharp, but ultimately the buck stops with Biden himself. Biden himself choosing to continue running. If he had said earlier on, I don't think I want to run in 2024, it would probably be more well known that, like, yeah, duh, he's not going to go for it. It's just not his thing. He's not going to be the Democratic nominee in 2024. He is too darn old, and he recognizes this, but he didn't recognize it. And so the media kind of had to give him a sense of legitimacy in that, like, okay, well, he's going to run for president, and yeah, he's really old, but he's running for president, so we can't just pretend he's too incompetent. It's not so much that the media tricked American voters. I mean, American voters can see things. There were problems with Biden in front of the cameras that people saw. Remember the "Where's Jackie" thing? He was asking where a congresswoman who was dead was. This was back in, I think, 2022, and it was just a horrible look. So people got to see some of that, and he did win the primary. Now, obviously, the Democrats did not run that primary perfectly. They were very aggressive towards people who were not named Joe Biden in kicking them off the ballots. So that was bad. But the fact of the matter is the voters lined up behind him in 2020, and that was what got him in there initially and got his foot in the door for 2024. If the Democrats had nominated someone else in 2020 and that nominee went on to defeat Trump, which they had a pretty darn high likelihood of doing that because of COVID and the economic pain that people were feeling, they would vote against Trump because of that, not so much because they love the Democrats, but because they're like, oh my God, we need a change of pace from President Trump. Then we would have a Democrat who can speak complete sentences, a Democrat who would not say, "Where's Jackie?" thinking that congresswomen who are alive or who are dead are actually alive, not putting their foot in their mouth all the time. So, I mean, it was the voters. And to be fair to them, Biden declined from 2020 to 2024. There is a difference. He was sharp and coherent in his 2020 debates against Trump. He did fairly well. He made Trump look pretty bad. He called him out for a lot of his mishandling of COVID and just his divisive rhetoric, pointing out, hey, there are not red states nor blue states. There's the United States. And just looking like a rational, normal person compared to him in the debate. And yet in 2024, we saw the difference was so stark. He was up there saying we finally beat Medicare. And Trump is taking advantage of that, being like, yeah, he's beating it to death. He's beating Medicare to death. And he's out saying, Biden doesn't even know what he's saying on the debate stage, just making Biden look terrible. So it was a total reversal. He was a normal old guy who kind of had his problems at times in 2020. And then by 2024, it was like, oh my goodness, couldn't have seen that coming, right? People should have been more cognizant of what they were voting for in 2020. They should have understood that the guy could have declined within 4 years. He was doing all right in 2020. You could look at him and be like, okay, that is an old guy. That's a guy who sometimes has dementia-ish moments maybe, but he's got what it takes to serve as president. And then by 2024, that had changed. So there needs to be some recognition that people did vote for this, and to compare this to the Iraq War, I just don't know how. The Iraq War was a disastrous foreign policy decision. Biden, yeah, he's the type of person who he shouldn't have been in there necessarily, but were things going wrong because of him? No, not really. There were people making some decisions for him that maybe they don't normally make for the president, but they weren't necessarily horrible decisions on every issue like we're seeing with President Trump. We're seeing dismal decisions being made every day, dismal unconstitutional decisions that violate people's rights, dismal decisions that take money from the poor and give it to the rich, and which dismantle the administrative state in violation of the separations of powers. So, yeah, I just don't see, we can't just keep beating this old drum of establishment bad, establishment bad, establishment bad. What we need to do is say, voters, vote for the right candidates. That's the thing. The buck stops with people who vote. And we should be very kind to voters. We should not scold nor lecture voters. There's nothing wrong with voting for Joe Biden in 2020 or 2024 in the primary. There's nothing wrong with that. But had people not voted for Joe Biden in 2020, we wouldn't have been in the mess of 2024. There probably would have been a different Democratic candidate. As I have pointed out earlier in this video, that Democrat would have been able to speak more coherently. It would have been less obvious that they were falling apart. They would have had to deal with some economic problems as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic fallout, but they would not be in the same boat as Joe Biden or as Kamala Harris, because Kamala Harris suffered from guilt by association with Biden. People were like, you were part of the Biden administration and you said you wouldn't do anything different in an interview, so yikes, I'm a little distrustful. So yeah, I just don't see what Cenk Uygur is getting at here, how, it always has to be the establishment's fault. This is one of those things where, people on the right try to win over people on the left by saying, don't you hate the Democratic establishment? Don't you hate the establishment as a whole? The uniparty, they sometimes say, well, you need to ally with the anti-establishment Republicans. You need to ally with President Trump. And it's like, no, President Trump wants to help the establishment. He wants to make Wall Street a lot richer. He's just an unhinged goon. And so that type of behavior, that loose cannon speaking, that is the type of thing that leads people to go, oh, maybe he's anti-establishment. Maybe it's edgy and cool to support Trump. No, it's not. No, it's not. And bashing the so-called establishment all the time is not edgy or cool either. Bashing the establishment is a good thing generally, but you have to bash them for stuff that's actually concrete. Not just, oh, something went wrong, therefore it's the establishment's fault. Joe Biden, the buck stops with him and the buck stops with the voters. Joe Biden should not have decided to run again in 2024, and voters probably should not have chosen him over other Democratic candidates in 2020. The establishment cannot just make people vote. People have agency. Do not deprive people of their agency. Do not use language which strips people of their agency and which just pretends that, oh, the media just controls everything in America. The media makes people vote for people. The media pulled the wool over people's eyes. Yes, the media distorts the truth a lot, but people vote based on what they perceive the truth to be, and they don't vote based on what they perceive the truth to be. They have control over who they vote for, It's not the establishment that's just handing people votes. So yeah, I don't know. I get, the older I get, the more tuned into politics I get, the less sympathetic I am to the whole, oh, the establishment, rah, rah, the establishment, did bad, bad, bad. The hard left and hard right obsession, both ends of the political spectrum with just complaining about the establishment vaguely is kind of exhausting. Let's talk about real solutions. Let's talk about who the buck really stops with. Let's not lecture voters or scold voters, but realize that they are the ones who actually make things happen. They are the movers and shakers, not the establishment, whatever the hell that means. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, or subscribe to this channel. Thank you so much for watching. This has been The Morris, The Merrier, and I look forward to speaking to you in my next video.